So let's take a look at this third student. This student is coming from Michigan, which again, having read from Stanford, this would be somewhat interesting because we don't necessarily have a huge number of applicants from Michigan. I would imagine that equally so the top schools on the East Coast would be thinking, that might be interesting to get some students from this part of the country. So that's one thing I'm paying attention to. I also noticed that the student is at a top 20 school in Michigan. That's interesting, but doesn't tell me a whole lot. I'd really want to delve deeply into the school profile to learn more about this particular school. The student has a 4.0 GPA, and so that sounds great. I'd want to know, is this weighted or unweighted? If it's unweighted, then that tells me the student has solid A's, but I really don't have a sense of where they fall within their class. What I'm thinking about each time is where these students fall within their class. So is this student in the top 1%, top 5%? How do they compare to their peers? What kinds of classes are they taking? How many APs are offered in their school? How many are they taking compared to their peers? So I don't have a whole lot of information here, but about what exactly the classes are that this student is taking. But that certainly is competitive. Having all A's is competitive in this environment. Let's take a look at the students' majors that they're interested in: chemistry, finance, biology, and music. So that's kind of interesting. So this is a techie who has a music side to him or her. And that's going to really present itself later when we look at this student's extracurricular activities. So already there's something potentially interesting running through this student's file. If we look at their stats, very strong SAT 1s, 2220. That sounds great. No need to retake that. That's competitive and certainly among the top that a student could have. That would be great. ACT is strong also, but I'd really be paying attention probably to that SAT, which is very strong. This student has an 800 in math and chemistry for the SAT 2. Most of the top schools require or strongly recommend that students take at least 2 SAT 2s, with one of those being in math, and so this student has done that. What I'd want to know is, if this is really a top 20 school in Michigan, are most of the students applying with multiple SAT 2s, more than just 2, maybe 3 or 4? So that's what I'd be comparing that student to. If we take it, so overall, this is an academically competitive student. I don't see anything in particular in this file that makes this student more academically competitive than others. If this student is doubling up on sciences in a particular year, or maybe had 4 SAT 2s, I don't see any APs. I maybe assume they just didn't list them here, but I definitely would want to see some APs if this student has them available to him or her at their school. It's also possible they wouldn't have them at their school, and a student wouldn't be faulted for that. So let's take a look at the extracurricular activities, because this will tell me really what's interesting and unique about this student. So Quiz Bowl captain, 9 through 12. So that's great. I see depth of commitment as well as leadership. Band, 11th and 12th and president. Again, leadership, that's great to see. Marching band, are we seeing a trend? Lots of music. We have clarinet section leader in 10th grade. That's noteworthy. Then we have clarinet again. So this student is involved in a number of different musical instruments. We'll see later on too. Clarinet for 4 years. Part of the Michigan Youth Arts Festival soloist. Part of the Woodwind Quintet from 9th through 12th. With the highest possible rating. So this student is going outside of just what's available in his or her school to really perfect and master a particular instrument. Has also been involved in piano and percussion. So this student is extraordinarily talented from a music perspective. What I would want to, so that definitely stands out. In fact, all of these extracurricular activities are focused around music. I actually don't see a lot in the sciences. So that's something that I would be considering. I would expect to see some of this student's essays written about the sciences, just because that's more of the academic side. But I also want to get a sense of why this student is so interested in music. What what do they see in music that is so compelling. But this is a very, very strong music profile. What would help this student quite a bit stand out from an admission officer's perspective is if they submitted a fine arts submission along with their application. So with a student with this kind of background, I would expect to see them have an audition with their clarinet. So either send in a submission tape or go to the school or schools that they're applying to and actually audition to join those programs. If that student did this and got a positive or very high rating from the faculty members who'd review that student, that would stand out, and that might be enough to push this student over into the really compelling category for me. Again, I'd want to know a little bit more about the academic background because they might not be as competitive, but there's a lot of potential with this particular profile. I would also expect to see some really interesting essays focused on music. In fact, some of the most interesting essays I've ever read were students who have this sort of math and science music focus. And it really is incredible how some students are able to describe really how their mind thinks about music and how really there is a connection between sort of math and science and music as they see it. So there's a lot of potential to write some really compelling essays around this topic. So of the 3 case studies that I talked about, to me this is the most compelling, most interesting one. They definitely are competitive academically, but they have the most to work with here. Really a lot of involvement. I love that there's a lot of involvement in the school with leadership. So this isn't a student who just sits in the corner and studies. And also in their community. They're part of these state and local organizations, quintets, and things like that. So this student is a lot more compelling to me from that perspective.